So, hello, this is the final talk of the day. This one's going to be in English because we're very lucky to have Stephen Ellcock with us, who comes from the UK and who is the author of this incredible book called The Cosmic Dance. And I will pass it around. I think it's really interesting to see, you know, the whole amount of his work and why. And this is really an interesting story, and it's kind of not your usual format for a talk, because the story behind this meeting is that Karine Rougier, who is, by the way, the winner of the Drawing Now Prize Award last year of 2022, and she is now has now a solo exhibition at the Drawing Lab as a result of that. Karine Rougier actually reached out to Stephen Ellcock because they had lots in common, and I don't know if you find out about that through the book. You'll tell us the story. So I'm really interested in knowing how you guys met up. And we're also going to play a game, a sort of a game. I was given a few images. Some of them are Karine Rougier's work, and others are Stephen's images. So the story behind the Cosmic Dance is a very long story of that goes a few years back. Stephen considers himself as a collector of images, and he started posting these images on Facebook first.
On Facebook, yes.
Right, and these images are an incredible collection of symbols that go across cultures. So they kind of join up the cultures across the world through the power of images. The introduction that Stephen wrote to the book, The Cosmic Dance, is incredibly moving because it really explains how one can look at images and feel better in some ways, or feel joy, feel happiness. So I think before we start our game, I'm going to ask Stephen to explain the process a little bit, how that came about, and what does that mean to be saved by images?
That's rather all-encompassing question, but I'll try to fairly succinct answer.
We have 1 hour.
Right, okay, well, it might take well, I started, I've always, I suppose, been interested in pattern making.
May I ask you to...
Okay, yes, yeah. And pattern making, which has manifested itself in various ways throughout my life. And its latest manifestation, which has completely dominated my life, and is I started I basically started posting things on social media about 12 years ago. At a point in my life, I was extremely ill and was I couldn't leave the house, and I was in bed for several months. And one of my sisters persuaded me to sign up to Facebook, which I was extremely reluctant to do. To me, it was anathema. The thought of social media was something I had no intention of. It was a world that seemed alien to me. But so I after a lot of coercion, I did that, and I started making connections with people all over the world, just by default, not intentionally. And then I realized that just to amuse myself and a few close friends, I started posting images as well as sort of facetious and sardonic status updates. And the images received, I was getting a response from all kinds of people, which I wasn't anticipating. It was purely for my own entertainment, really. And then I realized that you could do something very interesting with social media at the time, with Facebook at the time, which it's actually been, it's more restrictive now, and so you can't actually do things like create albums with 20,000 images in, which is what I ended up doing. It's been circumscribed now, so you can't actually do that. And I realized there was a way of creating narratives and creating the juxtaposition of images and to create a sort of ever unfolding narrative. And as more and more of the world's archives and libraries and collections became digitized and scanned, there was just more and more material, and it gradually took over my life completely. And people thought, I have to say that close friends and things like that were concerned about my mental welfare, because they thought I was completely obsessed with doing this. I couldn't see what possible positive outcome could be. I said, I've lost my mind and just obsessively just posting images and rummaging around on the darker corners of the internet looking for images, and being up, sleepless nights. And at that point, I still had quite a powerful job in publishing, quite a high-powered job in publishing, and sort of a blessing in disguise. I lost my job in publishing, and so I had a lot of more time to devote. And around the same time as that, I joined Instagram and started posting on there. So it's kind of it's just because of the momentum building up over the last 10, 12 years. And then I was approached fairly early on, quite a few years ago, by publishers approaching me about creating books, but they hadn't really. The initial approaches were just people thinking, well, he's got tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of followers. So if we just publish a book, if only 1% of those people publish a book, we're going to make money. But they just so people would say, oh, you post lots of pictures of animals, so create a menagerie, which is sort of meaningless. I didn't want to do that, so I wanted to create books that had real meaning and sort of reflected, but sort of kind of reflected what I do on social media in a book, in a physical form. And so it took me quite a few years before I actually agreed to do anything. And this Cosmic Dance is my fifth book. More to come. And so Cosmic Dance was published end of last year, and it was intended as, it's kind of a culmination of the first phase of, that doesn't sound too pompous, of the first phase of kind of books that I want to do. Yes. And it's just kind of, because I've always wanted to do a sort of book that represents a sort of journey from the microcosm to macrocosm, from the smallest units of existence to the vastness of outer space.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing that journey with us. Karine, I'm really curious to know then how you reached out to Stephen, and what was it? What did you see? How did you find out about these images? And how could you describe these images? Because so far I haven't shown anything, and we don't know exactly what kind of images, for all, purposes, it could have been, pop art images. So how did you find out about these images, and how would you describe them, and how did you connect to them?
So, I bought a book about Stephen. The one, I think it's the second one. All Good Things. All Good Things. All Good Things. It's blue with a big eye, and I found one a few years ago. This book. So first, I discovered his images by book, not on the digital. And when I opened the book, I started navigating inside the book, and I find a few images I had already collected on my computer, because I spend many time on the same website as Stephen, like the public domain reviews, or places where you can find images on free that you can. So I was collecting these images on my computer and then printing them for my studio. And then I said, oh la la, and a second one, a third one, not so many, but a few. So, and then I bought his second book, another book, and then the Cosmic Dance, and just the title, I was like, oh la 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 la. And it was so linked to all what is inspiring for me. So then when I got the prize last year, and I find also, I was on the website, on the internet with, I was following Stephen first, and then I just wrote to him, because thanks to these digital medias, we can write to people we admire. So this is so nice. And I was very lucky that he replied in a positive way. And I was like, whoa, this is great after all this dark time we were living. So, and then we start to exchange, and then we met in Paris, and it was really nice. And so I asked him the idea for the exhibition. I asked Stephen if he was okay to do a dialogue with my drawings. I always dreamt of showing my drawings with older drawings. It was always a dream to show with engravings or past images, but it's very complicated to have the original ones. So it was just very...
it was quite intuitive, really. And
yes.
It wasn't, I kind of... the images suggested themselves to me. The images I shared with you for the exhibition, and they're just things that there wasn't necessarily a pattern to them. I just thought that, that they rhymed with.
Yes, exactly, like an echo.
An echo.
So I asked Stephen a selection of a few images. I thought maybe 5, 10, and he sent me so much. I was like, whoa!
I went over the top. I probably sent you about 300 images.
And he was sending me links also. Then we start to write, and it was so, saying me, oh, I have these images in this resolution. So it was going deeper and deeper inside the secrets of the image, where they come from. So it was really, you think you have something, and in fact you go much more further, like when you swim.
How would you characterize the kinds of images that you're both drawn to? If there's a way to do it.
I suppose in a very broad sense, I'm drawn towards sort of the arcane and the esoteric, and things drawn from magic and alchemy, and images relating to which was very basic, which has a great relationship to Karine's work. Things like tarot cards and playing cards and astrology, astronomy, cosmology. So, but that doesn't mean I'm not that I don't include and don't value contemporary artists.
You do, because there isn't a time limit in the images you collect. Because in the cosmic dance, I was really surprised when the first image from the 20th century appeared, and it was not at all related to this kind of imagery. So let's play the game. Okay. So I was sent images by Karine, both of her work and of Stephen's collection, and I kind of played the tarot, game with the images, and so I propose, relationships that might not be convenient or that might not trigger any thoughts. So who wants to go first? This is my first association, which seems quite straightforward, I think.
Yes.
Right.
Well, Karine uses a lot of imagery of the sea, of water, and using images that based on myth and alchemical texts, like the painting here. I think one of the biggest is like the Clavis Artist, isn't it? From one of the most famous alchemical texts, and that's one of my the image on the other side there is that's actually my next book, or actually a larger version of that is in my next book. So I'm doing a bit of advertising there. This is the provenance of this is very doubtful. It's approximately 1795, so it's late 18th century, and it's in the Wellcome collection. It's one of the earliest it's one of the earliest sort of early modern depictions of a mermaid. And there's a whole series of these. It's just extraordinary. So cryptozoology, and it's kind of, and I'm things like the descriptions of sea monsters and things like that. I'm being fascinated by those because a lot of them are obviously they're people mistaking things like manatees and other and sort of vast or whales and things like that as monsters, and they're actually real things. And I think I've been obsessed with mermaids for a long time.
But this one is like the mermaid is special because it's like it was mixed with a plant,
it's mixed with the plant,
because it's not like or a seaweed because it's not
almost
like the
botanical,
typical tail really.
No,
with the, no, it's like
It doesn't have the appealing quality of Disney mermaids,
No.
does it? It's a very vegetal, and kind of goes across different kinds of entities. Let's say physical and specimens. Karine, are you sorry?
So
Stephen.
I think also with Karine's work is the that borderline between different categories of like animal and vegetable, mineral, the spiritual and the physical, the different elements and things like that. And yes, I think we have that in common a lot.
So how do these? So yeah, Stephen's absolutely right. It's never just a duality of animal, human, fish, female. There's a kind of a fluidity between lots of elements in your work. What are the spiritual properties of these physical kind of heterogeneous associations? In this case, particularly. Otherwise, it's too broad a question.
Maybe they're just real, totally free, because they can go wherever they want, and just maybe it's maybe also linked to our senses. That you can look at a drawing, but you can feel a smell or hear a music.
Synesthesia.
Yeah.
Synesthesia.
Yeah.
Do you experience that? Do you experience
every day?
I was thinking, how lucky.
No, I think because I live in Marseille, and I think in the sea, yes, we're lucky. I swim also in winter with another swimsuit, very done specially. So yes, I think when you swim, you share with other friends, and then you can see another world, very calm, very precious, protected from reality. And we forgot about this. You just put your goggles and...
That's a really interesting idea, that, being away from reality. Because I wondered if there was a kind of escapism in your interests in these sorts of esoteric, magical images. And why? Because for me, art is to kind of like make me feel alive and reality and political issues. But how do you connect with that, or is this idea of like trying to free yourself from the day-to-day world?
I regard what I do as incredibly political. Everything I do, there is a political intention behind it all, and I think, and I become more radical the older I get, and I'm incredibly angry and radical now.
We like that,
but in general. And dissatisfied with the way they were, and I think that if I wanted to be a sort of very trite way of explaining it, is I think that if I do try and comment with, it's easier to do on Facebook because then you can do whole tranches of images. I do think that I'm deliberately commentating obliquely on current events, and I think it may not be, it's not overtly, but I hope that it has that significance to people, that people get those resonance, the resonance with our current predicaments and things like that. So, and also I think certainly with cosmic dance and with the things I'm intending to do in the future, there is a sort of ecological message as well in the concept of cosmic dance in particular. And like I mentioned that in the introduction. A vision of the importance of regaining perspective and the importance of re-establishing the idea that every unit of existence is important, every discrete unit of existence is important, and we need to cultivate that and maintain that. Otherwise, we're completely doomed.
Thank you for that, because we're going to talk about ecology, I think. Oh, sorry. So this is the second association. Karine, go ahead.
Yeah. Yes, I can rebondir, bump. I don't know how you say to bounce. What you said, that our images are political because, okay, it's to talk about the beauty of the world, and that you can look at a drawing and that you'll be like in a fairy. But okay, but there's not just this story. You can tell messages, and you choose this. This one is a drawing, so it's like A4, and it's made. It's the portrait of Masha Amini, And so this Iranian girl who has been killed a few months ago because her hair was coming out of the... And so...
in Iran.
Yeah, in Iran. And then there was all the... What happened. And I really... Normally I don't connect so much to reality. I mean, I can hear things, but I wanted so much to draw her. I don't know, I felt something very strong, so I said, okay, and I looked at images and I was like, wow, so it was very intense, and I wanted to draw her like where her hair would go. So this is the Vesuve at the back. It's also in the cosmic dance, but I had this image also before, so it's like really linked, because I love
serendipity.
Yeah. I love volcanoes, and so she is like representing all the women and all the people on earth that are fighting for freedom, and is written maintenant vivante on her boat.
Now alive, now living.
Alive. This is the text that my friend Nina Léger, who's a writer, she wrote about my drawings. And she has a short of a boxer, and she will always stay alive. And it's this idea. So, and also this I loved it. The
Venus in the shell, the birth of Venus. As
yes,
well,
the boat. Yeah. And at the back, you had sent me this image.
I have no idea how to interpret this image.
But I love because they put the fire.
It have a text,
no, it has no text, but they're putting fire on something. The little angels. No?
It's from one of the 17th century emblem books, were obviously incredibly popular. It was a real fashion, particularly in Europe in the 17th century, and they're supposed to be their purpose is to instruct, but also to delight as well. But and this one, I just love. I think I have no idea what the intended message is of this, but just the pictorial qualities of this.
It's so ambiguous, but yes. Now, in relation to your image, I see it as an impulse of violence and destruction, because they're burning the table. So now I see it completely differently. So
they're bringing
light. Yes.
Light. I think it's divine light being reflected.
But it's burning the table. The divine light is literally burning the furniture.
Well, that's what happens.
That's what happens when you play with fire.
There's an instructive element and a cautionary element to that. So.
But that's the thing of images, isn't it? Whereby when what you're doing, Stephen, is you take them out of that context, isn't it? And I think you do the same. And so I was able to see it in a different way than the instructive origin of the image, because they are now freed from their context. But there's a certain danger to doing that, isn't there? To just look at images as if they were timeless or not.
I think you can do that. There is a danger, but I do like the isolating thing, the more bizarre and idiosyncratic things. I think that then they gain new meaning, particularly with juxtaposition of other images. It's what's important, and what's important with what Karine does, and what I think is important about what I attempt to do is the correspondences between the images, whether on the page or whether they're on Instagram or whether they're on Facebook or whatever. So it's the whole the collage effect that producing disparate elements can create a new
meaning.
Thing with a new meaning. So it's like exquisite corpse, the game of exquisite corpse, and things like that. Or
Karine?
Maybe,
because that's kind of the way you produce your works, and then there's your images as well. You don't just juxtapose found images. You also produce new bodies, new situations, new elements.
It's a way of inventing a new story, propose something. It's like it's an invitation. It's like.
So this is, again, I think I was very basic in my association, whereby you had two mermaids, you had two winged creatures. Can you tell us a little bit about these two works?
Well, my image is it's from an Islamic prayer book. I think Iranian, Persian. I think 17th century. So that's a jinn. So that's an angel. But there's also, but I just love the sort of anthropomorphic and those kind of Islamic illuminations are just beautiful. And I think that, and then in the angel in or the jinn in Karine's work there is very like depictions of Islamic angels holding the spheres of existence, like the.
But you say from the Islamic images, but also then it's the mix with the Fra Angelico angels, wings. So it's like you can feel, you can see an image. Maybe if you see it like this, and then when it just put colors, and it will become. So it's the idea that it is linked. What you said at the beginning, that an image from this origin with, I mean, they are linked.
Yeah, and it's a way to kind of get into different cultures, but through probably a way of connecting them in the same kind of spiritual way they first originated.
Well, I think
in some ways,
particularly with what I like about this angel, this jinn, Peri, is that it's depicted with a goblet of wine, and people, which is probably people's. The West sort of received ideas about Islam in the West are very blinkered and very prejudiced and very short-sighted. They're not accurate. So people have prejudices and people have assumptions. So people might think that Muslims do not drink alcohol, and why is an angel? So I like to subvert those kind of things as well. So include those kind of elements.
And Karine, this winged figure is holding something, which could be a sun or the moon. So tell us a little bit about that creature.
She's holding down, it's the moon, but then if you want to see the sun, you can see the sun because the reflection. And this is on pieces of
terracotta,
where I found when I swim. So in the sea, you find pieces of like, and but originally the image it's in the cosmic dance. It's for the origin of the universe, and he's holding all the circle of the colors. You know,
the color spectrum.
The spheres is the cosmic spheres. Yes. So it's basically the model of the universe.
Yeah.
It's the angel roux. Yes. It's not. I don't think it's in all good things. I think.
Yes.
Karine knows all your images too much.
It's like the archangel, the most senior angel, I think, in certain positions. So.
Okay, this is now starting to be a bit more. The relationship's a bit looser and not as basic, I guess, or not as formal in some ways. So tell us a little bit about these two images and why they attracted you, because they're so different from the other ones.
The one on the far right there.
None of them are Karine's, by the way.
No, they're not. These are both. These are also my sort of science gone wrong, or sort of science misled. So, which I love, that they're sort of the wonderment, they're the wondrous aspect and the magical aspect of science, and they're both depictions of things that are not. So, the one on the extreme right is from an extraordinary manuscript that I only discovered late last year, and it's undeservedly obscure. It's called the Codex Canadiensis, and it's only recently they established the author of it, and it's the first record of the flora and fauna and the indigenous people of Canada, and by a Jesuit priest. And it's extraordinary. There are kind of 300 or 400 images, and it depicts the lifestyles of the indigenous people. It's incredibly valuable from an anthropological and historical point of view, because it's the only depiction of all the different peoples of Canada and Alaska, and what they were doing, and depictions of rituals and things. No, so it's considered like an almost sacred document by the descendants of those of indigenous people as well. But he also attempted to, he attempted doing the most banal and mundane things like preparation of food and fishing and building fires and things, but also smoking the pipes, but also doing the ritual things and hunting and stuff. But he also tried to document all the birds and animals and fish, and some of them extraordinary, like here he's depicted a unicorn. But some of them are incredibly accurate and incredibly sort of really, particularly fish and birds. There are some of them really beautiful and drawings. But some are just, he lets his imagination run riot.
I love this story because it really kind of shows how an artist creates, actually, because there you are looking at reality and just drawing everything you see, and then you think, but what if, you know?
See, I think some of them you can tell if you go through the manuscript, you can tell the ones he observed he drew firsthand, so he was drawing from real life, and you can draw the ones that people probably said to him, and they were tales of mythic animals and things like that. So it's not the unicorn isn't the only one. There are lots of very bizarre animals.
It's probably the mythology as well.
They would have said, "Oh yes, there's an animal with a horn and it looks like a unicorn." And then the difference between the ones that he imagined and the ones that he observed is really fascinating document. It's in a library in Tulsa, and the whole thing has recently been scanned, and I really recommend looking at it. It's an incredible document. And the one on the other one is, again, that's a bit like the mermaid in that this is from the collection of St Bartholomew's Hospital, the oldest hospital in London, and this is an example of of sort of trial and error anatomy and physiology. So they thought this was obviously. This like a human, a child or a baby or a fetus that had two heads, but so they were ascribing monstrous attributes to the fact that it was obviously some poor, unfortunate, deformed child that probably died before birth or died very, very young. So this is the kind of that sort of eschatological. Sort of worship of kind of the strange and the monstrous and the bizarre and things but the people that were creating these diagrams and things were also creating really important anatomical diagrams of the nervous system, of the circulatory system of the organ. So at the same time, in the same way that Isaac Newton was obsessed with alchemy, was completely obsessed with these kind of irrational. The most rational man was obsessed with the irrational. So it's the same with sort of surgeons and anatomists and like that.
And Conan Doyle, was a spiritualist.
Conan Doyle
was Spiritism.
He was a spiritualist. Yes.
Yes. So I chose also to show an image of your exhibition and for you to explain a little bit, we've looked at the images and the source of your inspiration and some of your works. And then there's also, for Stephen, working those images into a book and organizing those images in an incredible way, the macro, but there's also the idea of God and, all of these chapters in the book. And then for you, there's the spatializing of the drawings, because we didn't really talk about scale, are they big, are they small? You've started with very small drawings, and then suddenly, you were invited to do exhibitions, and you've built a career as an artist, and now you show the works in the space. So how do you go about, organizing and thinking and installing your drawings in space, in the exhibition space?
For this one, especially, you mean for this story?
Whatever you prefer in general, or this one specifically.
For this one, it was special because it was just not only my drawings, so to imagine the link with the images. And I wanted the prints of Stephen, so they were printed on paper. They were just put on the wall directly, like these affiches. So it had, and they were all larger than my drawings. And they come like how you say une virgule,
like a comma. A comma.
Maybe it's a bit like this, but I didn't plan because it's not easy to put to when I imagine this story.
Like so, punctuation.
Yes,
punctuation.
Maybe, and at the same time, or maybe it's my drawings were a punctuation for I don't know, but so. But this one in the center is like it's the when they realized that la vision héliocentrique, that the sun would be in the center of the world, and this one is so beautiful. Is the head of a comet, but I find it really look like also a clitoris, or like if you put I don't know. I also see other things. I don't know, and it's very beautiful. And also, when maybe you saw this exhibition that was Face au Soleil, it was recently in Paris. And I saw au Musée Marmottan, and I sent you, Stephen, the images because there were these drawings, but the original ones, because this is pastel, black pastel on paper. Yes. And this was, it was at the opening. I met someone who told me you should see it's facing the sun. Yeah. So also the title is so beautiful. And then I saw this original drawing of the eclipse, and it's just a black charcoal. But I don't really answer your question.
You did partially, but you can go on. You did because it's interesting that the drawings are bigger, and that your ones, the ones you produced yourself, are smaller. So why do you work on that difference of scale, and why are the walls partially painted as well? There's colors on the walls.
At the beginning, I wanted to do also a comet with a project, a painter painting project. How you say? Airbrush. Thank you. But I had never done this because I wanted a gesture more, because the miniatures are very the drawings okay, but it's on paper. I wanted a gesture more uncontrolled, like. So I did with. It's a first tried, thanks to this prize I won. I tried. But I hope it will imagine differently. And I wanted to have a bright color, is like the sun. It's like, because when you are in a space of the exhibition, it's like if you pulled the sun, and also it's like the lava. And also the name of the color, because the name of the colors are always cœur d'oursin, corail d'oursin. Oursin is the sea, you know, the
urchin.
Black
it's
urchin?
The heart of urchin.
What you eat. In Marseille,
Urchin's heart.
We eat them, on les pêches. So it's either from the sea, and also the lave. It's like alchemy of starting with the fire, and then we end with the ice, because we start.
And of course, the head of a comet is ice. It's basically a big, huge ball of ice.
So. And what's the origin of the comet image?
It's from a German encyclopedia, Atlas of the Sky, the sort of very popular best-selling 19th century thing, which has the most extraordinary lithograph.
But it's not a photograph. That's
it's
the weird thing. It is really a painting. But from what period?
It's about 1870.
1870, before the invention, before the first comet was.
No, there were photographs of comets from about the 1850s, 1860s, which was in telescopes.
Yes, yeah, absolutely, yeah.
So this would be based on a photograph.
Oh, it's 1970.
No, 1870, 19th century, yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, there are some extraordinary, very early.
And how weird is it that the sky makes you think of flesh, of the human body, and an intimate part of the human body? It's kind of wonderful, that connection.
That's actually, I'm going to do another advert now. That's actually, and it's only last week I had to change the final spread in my next book, I'll do later in this year, and that's in it. That's actually the final amazing. Image in.
It's incredible. It's an incredible image.
Which seems like it.
So now the opposite, as we did before, 2 images of Karine's work, and I was really interested.
Right way back.
Oh no, this is one of yours. Sorry, I was really interested in this idea of the very intimate domestic or workspace as a sort of cosmology that you created in your drawing, and then the other drawing that I cannot identify.
It's a constellation. It's the constellation Ara.
Exactly,
yes.
And I really love that connection. You don't often depict, like you were saying, you kind of like move away from reality. So each time I see an interior of yours, I'm surprised, because it's usually, you know, the elements and creatures, and in this case it really is kind of almost a domestic setting. So how this what kind of work comes about?
The alive nature morte, how you in English you say
still life.
Still life, and we say dead nature.
Nature more, yeah.
This is so
Italian as well.
Yes.
It's a very different perspective.
But I like it's like to represent these kinds of scenes, because it's it is a way of putting others. How you say it? For me, it's very realistic. It's like.
Are these the objects you surround yourself with at home?
No. Yes and no. Yes. And my studio, at the studio. And there is the Ouroboros, the sign that's of the infinite. Also, the images are from. There is the clavis artiste, that's a manual d'alchimie, a volcano stone, and it's just a way how you. It's like maybe a poem, a haiku or something that you can put together different elements.
Or the disparate elements.
Yeah, or a cadaveric ski, and it's a very. It's when I do this kind of work, it's like it's relaxing.
In what way is it relaxing? Because the other works take something else from you.
Yes, more. Yeah,
they're more visceral.
Yes. So this is very
fascinating. Yeah, this kind of like resetting.
Yes, I imagine a beautiful house, just a woman lying down, just reading books. A book, empty house, just books.
Stephen's books.
Nothing else. Big window.
You're allowed to have other books.
And this constellation, it's quite extraordinary, because it has fire, but it also has a sort of a sculpture.
This is from one of the earliest celestial atlases of constellations by Johannes Bayer, of which there were, I think it was originally early 17th century, and there were multiple editions of, and this is from possibly the most beautiful edition of all, where they're actually fairly accurate. The depiction of as maps, they're actually quite accurate of the placement of the stars. Yes, and some of them are incredibly fantastic with dragons, and serpents and hydras and things like that. It's a really beautiful document.
So this is that's the one I can identify. It's a tarot card, isn't it? Okay. And again, I think we're going towards the political again, fear, or, there's fire in both of them, but there's really something happening in your drawing.
It's happening outside.
Exactly, yes. Because again, we're going to that idea of escapism, and actually in your work, there are concerns, right? There are preoccupations. Tell us a little bit.
This one is
about them.
called Girls, like I wanted like a
slogan.
A slogan or a band. And it's the Amazon, the woman, the warrior women. Normally the image it was men on horses, and I just changed with other bodies, and they are just in. We don't know where they are, because with the oil painting you can do very smooth surfaces. So I imagine they are in plain, a wild space, but maybe it's also under the sea, and it's the idea of keep on fighting for the freedom of spirit and of like. And I am so happy because this image is about the fire that you sent also, and everything was so linked, because these images he sent for you proposed, and I had something with the tiger, so everything was like response.
That's
to...
a salamander, not.
Sorry, a salamander.
So,
but it does look. It doesn't look like a salamander,
yes.
But it is. It is a salamander.
Oui,
no,
sorry.
I can say it does look like. Obviously, look like a tiger. Because the salamander is the mythical. It cross the fire and then survives fire, so it's a symbol of eternity and durability.
Stephen, can I ask you, so this year here in the exhibition, the focus was very much on a feminine prism onto contemporary art and drawing in particular. And so I would love to ask you about the sources of the images and what's the female role in them. Are women making these images? How are they portrayed? And because women are often connected to esoteric dispositions and magic, sorcery, witch hunting, being also criticized for all those things. Can you tell us a little bit what you learned about that?
Well, if you obviously there's one of the most interesting developments in both art scholarship and curation and in actually in exhibitions are being organised in the art world in general, is the rehabilitation and rediscovery of so many previously overlooked women artists, and there are more being discovered every day. There are multiple books being published as well, some of which are incredible. I'm sure the Jennifer Higgy book that's just been published is a remarkable book. And the rediscovery and rehabilitation, the new awareness of people that laboured in obscurity. It's not hyperbole to say that every week I will discover some sort of extraordinary artist, and 90% of the time they will be women artists who I've never heard of, who have an extraordinary body of work that has recently been discovered. And I think that the balance is changing, and changing for the better, in terms of that art history is being rewritten all the time, and people are having to reassess certainly the history of 19th and 20th century art, and obviously way before that, but 20th century in particular. I think if you look at in the books that I'm doing now, I think that in the new book, I think there are more women artists, and certainly in terms of contemporary artists, there are far more women artists than men. And that's not a deliberate policy, but that's just how it happens. There are things that are extraordinary.
Because you've been finding out about them,
yes,
basically.
Yes.
And what about in the old imagery that you look at? Do you have, because sources are kind of a question, aren't they? Some of them you don't know, they're anonymous. Others belong to certain groups of archives.
Some of them are anonymous, and it would be a mistake to try and gender them, or sort of ascribe a gender to them.
Exactly.
Yeah. So, but there are definitely there are lots of art. There's lots of art from the pre-19th century that is definitely by women. Certainly, whether it be scientific illustration. Obviously, the one area where women were allowed to pursue a career as an artist, certainly up to the sort of mid-19th century, was a botanical art. So you get all these extraordinary botanical artists, and some of whom lived the most remarkably adventurous, daring lives. The things they did were just beggar belief. That sort of someone like Maria Sibylla Merian and her daughters heading off to Suriname and the Amazon, wearing sort of full 17th century clothing with and in the jungle, and sort of documenting literally hundreds of new, if not thousands of species of insects, reptiles, flowers, plants, trees, and these are extraordinary tales of people like the German Dietsch family, which was several generations of botanical artists, but the greatest of whom are all women. There were a couple of male Dietsches whose work is inferior to their mothers and sisters, but their work of just they can embody in a painting of a thistle, for example, is what they were allowed to do. That would be acceptable. What they were allowed to do, it's as profound as any late Renaissance portrait or any contemporary portrait. And the other thing that I think that we've had is that so many artists, women artists, who particularly people have been rediscovered lately. But the most famous example is obviously Hilma af Klint. They were involved with the sort of spirituality. They were women who
Emma Kunst, who was a healer.
Yes, was a healer. So they were involved in healing because that was what that was a way of them enabling them to do that, or were channeling spirits or whatever. And there's sort of, you look at people like Georgiana Houghton in the mid 19th century, who was like one of the most. She was one of the most highly praised and wealthiest portrait painters, and highly respected. And at the height of Victorian, the height of empire, she suddenly started receiving. She believed she was receiving messages from God, and started doing these incredibly elaborate and intricate abstract visions that they are the trite thing to say. I know, and it's annoying if you post them. People say, "Oh, Kandinsky must have seen these," or Jackson Pollock must have seen these. No, I guarantee they didn't, because they've been hidden in the Victorian Spiritualist Union library for 150 years. It's just this remarkable. It's just this whole treasure trove of.
It's wonderful to listen to both of you, because suddenly you have this idea that the world is so varied and there's so much to find out about, and it's really incredible. We're probably running out of time, but so I wanted to finish with this image. I think that's all we have time for. Karine, the female body is really important in your work, but it's painted in a way that is not catering to a sort of marketed sexuality or image of the female body. Well, first of all, you're a woman, so I was wondering, how is it that you go about painting the female body? Is it bodies that you have in your mind? Are you thinking of other images of female bodies? How do you build these creatures?
I am fascinated by my girlfriends, by my mother, my grandmother. But also by man, by human. But the woman has something like a secret, like a matrice, very powerful. And it's funny because this afternoon I was at the Louvre with my friend Meenakshi, who came from Calcutta, and we went together to the Louvre to see. And we went to see this sculpture I love, L'Esclave de Michel-Ange, because it's like a very androgyne sculpture. And it's funny because you talk about a woman, but I think it's maybe the spirit of woman. And this body, we really spent a long time there this afternoon, and now you show it. So I'm like, because you feel the woman, but then it's a man, and maybe you feel a man and it's a woman. So it's the idea of the fluidity, I
think that's very much another political stance that you have, I think, in your work.
Yes,
of not kind of labeling gender in terms of the sex.
Yes, and also we talk about alchemy, and we all have in our body a man parts and a woman parts. And if the man would listen more to the woman part, it would be not that so in this state, the world. I am sure about this. So, and also we must listen more to our man parts, and then it would be more balanced vibes. This is Garuda.
This last image probably doesn't have a lot to do with the sculpture, but it's very, it's standing, and it's
the stance, I think, because I like that.
Just formally.
Yeah, it's just as a painting, it's wonderful, and I've always been obsessed with the Hindu tradition of sort of composite animals and gods and goddesses and things, the way they combine, that they kind of like they're kind of they're macrocosm, so they contain the whole of creation. So Garuda, the bird god, here is a sort of, he actually represents the sun in certain. I think in Buddhism as well. Garuda does occur in Buddhism, doesn't he? I think Garuda is neither male nor female. I think
and he was like a vaisseau that they could. Yes. There are many representations of Garuda flying with people on his back.
With like Shiva and Krishna.
He was the
You guys know so much. much. I feel incredibly ignorant. Thank you so much. I think we could go on and on and on, and we must stop at some point. I think that maybe perhaps we can ask if there's any questions from the audience, if you guys want to ask anything.
Well, first of all, thank you, Joana. Thank you, Karine and Stefan, for such a precious share today.
Thank you.
That's very valuable to have you around, I have to say. And yeah, so there's so many pictures that you have encountered. We live in an era of pictures, and so how do you process all this material in order to bring to an essential?
It's a very chaotic. I have no system at all. It's very chaotic. Everything is in here. It's and I don't. And up until recently, I didn't have backups or anything, or hard drives.
Yeah.
I just sort of over time I know where to find things if I need to find them again.
Would you say it's
all internal?
Intuitive.
It's all intuitive. Yes, it's a great morass of useless information. My brain, I think. So, and I think it's yes. I know if things feel right. Mm-hmm. And I will spend, even with something like posting on Instagram, I will take an inordinate and absurd amount of time working out position and the sequencing. The sequencing of like social media and books in particular, hugely time consuming. But I think that I like to think that people can perceive what I'm trying to do with that.
Absolutely. No, it's very clear that this is great material for artists. I had the opportunity to share the book you have generously put together were precious.
Thank you.
Thank
you very much.
Highly recommend any of them. Yeah.
Thank you.
And can you give us any insight on your next production?
My next book is I'm not sure what it's going to be called in French because it doesn't translate very well apparently. No. Okay. But in English, the English title is Underworld.
Underworld.
So it's all things subterranean and subconscious from the physical, from the physical underworld. It's a geology from caves to caves of volcanoes, earthquakes, to human exploitation and human habitation. Through to imaginary underworlds of things like hell and heaven and fantastic worlds of the underwater worlds, and then psychological and subliminal worlds as well. So subconscious as well. So there's quite a lot in there.
Oh yeah.
And then it ends on a kind of coda of resurrection as well. So there's a brief chapter at the end.
Promising, very promising. Yeah. Oh. Well, this is I mean, there's an infinity of way to approach the universe, literally. So that's why it's always intricate to see how a mind is conceived.
Thank you.
You see what I mean? Okay. So yeah, so it has to be a sensitive thing. You have to pour yourself, right?
Yes, I would say yes. I would have to agree with that. It does. It's all consuming me. Yeah. So the people that have to live with me and put up with it. Yes, it is a source of probably exasperation and frustration for a lot of people.
Right.
Well, so I will spend weeks on end with sleepless nights just putting things together.
Thank you ever so much. It was incredibly inspiring. So Stephen Ellcock's book is published by Taschen. It's called The Cosmic...
no, it's not.
The Cosmic Dance.
It's not published
is it
by
not?
Taschen, no.
Oh, apologies, Taschen.
It's Thames and Hudson.
Oh, Thames and Hudson, of course. And the next one as well?
It's Thames and Hudson, yes.
And there's a French translation to the Cosmic Dance, which is called La Danse cosmique, I'm assuming. And so the next book is also going to be published by not Taschen.
No, it's Thames and Hudson.
Thames and Hudson, yes. And translated to French soon?
Yes, it's being translated now, isn't it?
For when? For the fall. Okay, so there you go. You can also follow Stephen on Instagram, Stephen Ellcock. It's an incredible account, and you get the measure of how hard Stephen works in his images. And you can also visit Karine Rougier's exhibition at the Drawing Lab. It's open until next week. So run there. It's an incredible exhibition. And again, thank you so much for your generosity. It was really wonderful, and I had a wonderful time in this very strange day. Thank you for being here.
Thanks.
Thanks very much.